You didn't get here by accident. This isn't some generic spiritual content opening line. It's a specific statement about what happened before you got here, and about what's happening now as you receive this. The call you felt, that inner voice insisting there's something more, that the path you're on isn't the one that was meant to be yours, that there's a version of your life that hasn't started yet, but somehow feels more real than the one you're living now. That call doesn't come from vague dissatisfaction. It comes from a specific kind of intelligence that field physics is beginning to map, and that ancient traditions described with a level of precision that, when you read it, feels like a description of your own inner experience. Quantum physics has shown that the field of possibilities isn't evenly distributed. Certain states of consciousness have access to certain possibilities that others don't, not as privilege, as resonance. And the call, that persistent feeling that something is waiting for you to arrive, is the signal that you're in resonance with a possibility that hasn't fully manifested yet. You got here because that call became impossible to ignore. Because the strategies you used to silence it, staying busy, conforming, postponing things until the conditions are right, stopped working. Or maybe they never really worked, and you were just waiting for permission to admit it. Let me describe what I see in people who reach this point. Maybe you're in a phase where you made all the right decisions, the safe career, the stable relationship, the responsibilities fulfilled, and yet you feel, more and more intensely, that something essential was left behind somewhere along that correct path. Not exactly regret. Something more specific. The feeling that you've been living someone else's life really well, while your own life is still waiting to begin. Maybe you're in the middle of a transition you didn't ask for, a loss, a breakup, the end of a chapter you didn't consciously choose, but that now, with some distance, starts to feel inevitable. As if the universe organized the collapse of what was no longer yours to make space for what's trying to emerge. And you're here looking to confirm what you already feel, that this wasn't random, that there's a direction in this chaos. Maybe you simply feel like this call is meant for you, but you don't know what you're being called to do. And that specific uncertainty feels stronger than any doubt you've ever had. It's not the doubt of someone who isn't sure they can make it. It's the doubt of someone who doesn't yet fully know where to go, but can no longer convince themselves that the current direction is right. Whatever the path, you arrived because the call came first. And the call came because you were ready to hear it. Even if ready doesn't mean prepared. Even if it just means it's no longer possible not to hear it. You're not going to learn how to discover your purpose here. You're going to recognize what the call actually is, and understand why the way most people respond to it creates exactly the delay that makes the path longer than it needs to be. Leaving before the end would mean missing the exact layer where the call becomes action, where the inner voice meets the map that can actually be followed. And here's the question that will stay with you, that will mature as this unfolds, and that once answered, dissolves the paradox that keeps most people hearing the call without being able to move toward it. If the call has already come, if you already know on some level that there's something waiting to begin, what exactly is between where you are now and the beginning of that? And if it's not a lack of information or a lack of conditions, then what is it? Before understanding what's changing in you, we need to look at what has always been holding you back. Most people who feel the call make a very specific mistake that looks like the responsible, mature thing to do, and is exactly what stretches the gap between hearing the call and actually following it. The mistake is waiting for clarity before starting. You feel that there's something to be done, something to begin, a direction that is more truly yours. But the direction isn't complete. The map isn't ready. You can't see the whole path before taking the first step. And the conclusion most people reach is, then I need to wait until I know for sure what to do, where to go, how it will unfold. That waiting has a logic that seems reasonable. No one wants to take the wrong step, especially when the call feels important. But that logic is based on a faulty premise. The idea that the call gives you the full map before you start walking. It doesn't. It never has, for anyone. The call gives you the first step. The second step only becomes visible after the first is taken. And the third, after the second. The path isn't revealed all at once. It's revealed in motion. You were taught that acting without full clarity is irresponsible. That risk should be minimized through complete analysis before action. That works well in certain domains: technical decisions, financial investments, projects with objective criteria. But the call isn't a technical domain. It's a domain where the information you need for the next step only becomes available when you move toward it. Here's the key inversion. The call doesn't ask for clarity before movement. It asks for movement to produce clarity. The fundamental distinction is between waiting for certainty to act and acting to find certainty. Waiting for certainty keeps you in the same place, the place from which you can't see any further. Acting to find it, even imperfectly, even without the full map, changes your position, and from that new position, more of the path becomes visible. Neuroplasticity shows this clearly. The neural networks that support your ability to perceive specific possibilities get stronger when you move toward those possibilities, not when you just think about them while staying still. The clarity of the call doesn't come before movement. It emerges from movement. Imagine someone trying to see the other side of a forest while standing still inside it. Every position shows a different arrangement of trees and shadows. The only way to see the path is to start walking, and it reveals itself tree by tree, not all at once. You are inside the forest, and the call is asking you to start walking, not to find a map of the forest before taking the first step. But here's what most people stop hearing, and it's exactly what changes everything. The call has a mechanism, and when you understand it, the way you relate to it shifts in a way that makes following it feel natural instead of frightening. The call isn't a voice coming from outside. It's a signal that emerges from within, from the level of the quantum field of possibilities that each consciousness uniquely inhabits. Quantum physics describes superposition as the state in which multiple possibilities coexist simultaneously before collapsing into a defined form. Human consciousness exists in constant relationship with this field of superposition, and what we call the call is the signal that a specific possibility within that field is in resonance with the unique configuration of who you are. It's not random intuition. It's not confused desire. It's the field responding to the specific nature of your consciousness, showing which possibility most closely matches who you genuinely are. And here's what most people don't understand about the mechanism. The call isn't static. It's not waiting for you to reach it as if it were a fixed destination. It moves with you, or more precisely, it reveals itself progressively as you move toward it, because each step you take toward the call changes the field of available possibilities, and what was hidden from your previous position becomes visible from the new one. This explains something many people describe about following a call, the feeling that the more you move forward, the more the path seems to organize itself around your movement. Not because the universe is creating the path for you, but because as you move toward the field of possibilities that resonates with who you are, the conditions that allow those possibilities to become real become detectable, whereas before, from your previous position, they were invisible. The call is not a destination, it's a direction. And the difference between the two is enormous. A destination can be mapped before you begin. A direction can only be followed in motion, and it becomes clearer as you move. The most accurate metaphor is that of a compass and the sun. You don't need to see the sun to know where north is. The compass points, and you start walking. With each step, more of the surrounding terrain becomes visible. You didn't have the full map at the beginning. You had the direction, and the direction was enough for the path to become discoverable. The call is the compass, you are the walker, and the terrain only reveals itself to those who are walking. Pause here for a moment. Take a deep breath, and let the question land in your body, not your mind. In which direction do you already know you should be moving, even without the full map? Not the question of how, the question of where. That answer, if you're honest, already exists. You just haven't given it permission to be real yet. The practical consequence of understanding this mechanism is that waiting for clarity before movement becomes recognizable for what it is. Not prudence, but a delay of the very process that produces the clarity you're waiting for. But there is a specific obstacle that keeps most people waiting even after they intellectually understand this mechanism. An obstacle that isn't about lack of information or courage in the usual sense. And when you truly understand this, you realize there's an obstacle no one talks about. What's blocking you is not what you think it is. The fatal mistake in responding to the call isn't a lack of courage. It's confusing the call with an identity you think you still need to earn. This needs to be said precisely, because it feels like the opposite of what's happening. When you hear the call and feel its intensity, it seems like the problem is external. Conditions that aren't ready, a map that isn't complete, circumstances that need to change. But when you look closer, there's another layer operating beneath all the external justifications. It's the belief that you need to become a different version of yourself before you're worthy of following the call. That you need to have resolved more things. That you need to be more stable, clearer, more mature, more ready. That the call is meant for a version of you that is still being built. And that only when that version is sufficiently ready will you be allowed to move toward it. This is the central paradox that paralyzes most people who feel the call strongly. You're waiting to become who you would be after following the call, in order to begin following the call. The logic is circular, and it's convincing because it looks like humility. I'm not ready yet. Sounds like responsible modesty. But there's a difference between recognizing real limitations in preparation and using the idea of not being ready as protection against the risk of starting. Starting is what makes you become who you need to be for the call, not the other way around. The distinction is between preparation before starting and transformation through starting. Preparation before starting assumes there's a version of you that must exist before movement. Transformation through starting recognizes that who you need to be emerges from the process of following the call, not as a prerequisite, but as a result. Every human being who has genuinely followed a call has gone through this. They didn't arrive at the beginning of the journey ready. They arrived willing. And that willingness was enough for the transformation process to begin, a process that cannot be initiated from outside the movement. Your feeling of not being ready is not an accurate diagnosis of inadequacy. It's the final gatekeeper before the real beginning, the voice that tests whether you will keep waiting or start anyway, without certainty. This is not an enemy, it's the last step before the threshold. And here's the question that remains suspended, the one that resolves everything when answered. If you don't need to be ready to start, if starting is what creates readiness, what is the difference between a genuine beginning and a premature one that leads to collapse? How do you know you're being called to begin now, rather than to prepare a bit more? That's the question most people use to justify waiting, and it has an answer, just not the one you'd expect. If you made it this far, if you stayed present with the discomfort of recognizing the "I'm not ready yet" pattern as protection rather than honest evaluation, then you are already responding to the call. That's the kind of honesty the call asks for. You've already begun. So how do you get past this final gatekeeper? Here's what changes everything. The answer to distinguishing a genuine beginning from a premature one isn't found through analysis. It's found by listening to a specific kind of internal signal that is different from fear and different from impulsiveness, and that you probably already know, even if you've never had words for it. The signal of a genuine call has a specific texture in the body. It is both scary and certain at the same time. Scary because it will require you to be different from what you've been. Certain because it recognizes something that already existed in you before any construction, before fears, before adaptations, before the narratives about who you were supposed to be. A premature beginning, the impulsiveness that is sometimes mistaken for a call, has a different texture. It feels urgent, but lacks that sense of certainty. It is driven by escaping something rather than being drawn towards something. And the body knows the difference, even when the mind is confused about it. The practice that makes this usable has a simple instruction. Before making any decision about the call, about when to start, about what the first step should be, sit with the question for at least 3 days without trying to solve it. Not 3 days of analysis, 3 days of paying attention to how your body responds when you consider the possibility of starting. Lightness or contraction. Openness or closing. Energy rising or energy fading. It's not emotion, it's a physiological signal. And the physiological signal is more reliable than mental analysis when it comes to distinguishing a genuine call from fear disguised as prudence, because the nervous system doesn't have the same motivations as the ego to distort information. After the 3 days, identify the smallest possible step in the direction your body signaled. Not the perfect step, not the step that solves everything, but the smallest real step available, and take that step. This completes the loop of Block 4. The question was, how do you distinguish a genuine beginning from a premature one? The answer, through the body's signal, not the mind's analysis. And the smallest available step, one that is both real and not paralyzing, is what initiates the process of transformation through beginning. Before continuing, feel this in your body for a moment. Think about the call that brought you here. Not the how, the where, the direction that already exists. Notice what happens in your chest, your stomach, in the quality of your breathing when you allow that direction to be real. That is the signal. You already know the difference between the call and fear. This resolves the paralyzing waiting. When you stop seeking complete clarity before movement and begin using the body's signal as a compass for the smallest available step, the process begins. And it's the process that produces the clarity that analysis never delivered. But there's a deeper layer that determines whether the process sustains itself or whether fear regains control after the first steps. And it has to do with what you do with the people around you who are not at the same point of calling as you. Comment now. I hear and I begin. As a declaration that you are choosing to respond to the call with the smallest available step, not when you're ready, but now, with what you have. And that deeper layer, it's where everything you've learned here either becomes permanent or disappears within days. The structure of the call, that inner voice insisting on a path that is more truly yours, that asks for movement before complete clarity, that transforms who you are in the process of being followed, is not a contemporary discovery of personal development or modern spirituality. It is the most consistent and universal teaching about how human beings find and inhabit what they are called to be.
Joseph Campbell, the mythologist who spent his life mapping narratives of calling across cultures from every continent and era, articulated what he called the hero's journey, a narrative structure that appears in myths from cultures that never had contact with each other, with a consistency he described as expressing a deep pattern of the human psyche. The beginning of this journey is invariably the call, and the first stage Campbell identified is the refusal of the call.
Not because the hero is weak, but because the call requires a crossing that the ego recognizes as dangerous to its current version of itself. The refusal is the final gatekeeper Campbell described, and overcoming it is what initiates real transformation. Mahayana Buddhism, especially the Bodhisattva tradition, the being in the process of awakening to serve all beings, describes the call not as a single event, but as the progressive expression of the deepest nature of consciousness. The Bodhisattva does not wait to be ready to begin practice. They begin where they are, with what they have, and the practice gradually transforms who they are. The Sanskrit word bodhi, awakening, does not describe a state achieved. It describes an ongoing process. The call is bodhi in motion. The psychology of Abraham Maslow, especially his research on what he called self-actualization, documented that people who lived at what he identified as the highest level of psychological functioning had in common not perfection or absence of conflict, but a specific quality of orientation. They moved toward what Maslow called meta-needs, needs for growth, meaning, and expression of potential, even when that movement was costly and uncertain. The difference between them and those who remained stagnant was not talent, condition, or circumstance. It was their willingness to respond to what Maslow called the quiet voice that persists despite the noise of external conditions. Sufism, especially in the Naqshbandi tradition, describes the spiritual path as a response to what they call the divine call, an inner inclination that, when ignored, produces what Sufis call ghafla, forgetfulness, numbness, a life lived in potential, but not in action. Following the call, in Sufi tradition, is not spiritual merit. It is responsibility toward what you are, and denying it is denying the nature of your being. Campbell, the Buddhist Bodhisattva, Maslow, Naqshbandi, Sufism, comparative mythology, contemplative tradition, humanistic psychology, Islamic mysticism, all describing the same structure. There is a call that emerges from what you most deeply are. It asks for movement before complete clarity, and transformation happens in the process of responding to it, not before. The distinction that separates those who follow the call from those who hear it without moving is not one of extraordinary courage. It's a matter of stance in the face of uncertainty. Waiting for certainty versus movement that produces certainty. Like a seed that doesn't wait for ideal conditions to germinate. It responds to the moisture it finds, the available warmth, the light that comes through, and what was inside it finally finds the conditions to emerge. Not when conditions are perfect, when conditions are sufficient. And when you embody this, not as an idea, but as an identity, something changes that cannot be undone. You are not discovering your call. You are recognizing that it has already arrived, that the voice insisting on a truer path is neither fantasy nor anxiety disguised as purpose. It is the most real signal you have access to, the field responding to the unique configuration of who you are, showing which possibility most closely matches your deepest nature. And you are recognizing that waiting for complete clarity before beginning is not prudence. It is the final gatekeeper that everyone who has followed a genuine call has had to cross. The voice that tests whether you will move despite uncertainty or continue waiting for guarantees the call does not offer, because that is not its nature. The call does not guarantee the destination. It guarantees the direction. We are those who choose to listen and begin, who understand that the call does not deliver the full map before the first step, because the map reveals itself in movement. Who know that the transformation the call produces does not happen before the beginning, but through it. Who recognize in the feeling of not being ready not a reason to wait, but the final gatekeeper before the threshold. This identity is available now, not after you've fixed more things, not after you're more ready. In the moment you decide that the direction is already clear enough for the next step. If you want to continue exploring the process of following the call, including what to do when the call meets resistance from the people closest to you, and how to navigate the space between where you are and where you're being called. Don't subscribe to the channel just to accumulate spiritual inspiration. Subscribe to this frequency of movement toward what is genuinely yours. Each video here deepens the same process, and if what you felt here, especially in the moment your body signaled the direction, resonates as a truth you already knew, then you already know what to do. You are someone who understands that the call doesn't ask you to be different before responding. It asks you to be fully what you are, and to move toward what can only be found in movement. The clarity you were waiting for before starting is on the other side of the first step, not before it. You're not waiting for the right moment. The right moment is the moment you stop waiting for the right moment. The smallest real step available, not the perfect one, not the one that solves everything, but the next genuine step, is accessible now. You know what it is. Your body has already signaled it. Comment the word beginning below, as a declaration that the call has been heard, and that the start is now, not after you are more ready. There is still one dimension that hasn't been touched. What happens when you begin to move toward the call, and the people closest to you are not at the same point? Because the call is individual, but you live in relationship, and there is a specific principle that determines how to navigate that space that no one who follows a genuine call can avoid. In the next video, I'll show why the relationships that love you most can be the ones that most challenge your call, and what to do in that situation in a way that honors both the call and the people without having to choose one over the other. What is yours is already moving toward you.